Alright, guys, what's up? So, I just wanted to count down some of my favorite new metal bands of all time. Yeah, I know new metal is not everyone's cup of tea. Some people might view it as that awkward metal trend back in the late 90s and early 2000s with all of that spiky hair, the dreadlocks, and the baggy clothing, and is what's considered pop metal. I personally don't think it was that bad, but I get why people weren't fans of it. For me, I personally think of it as close as I have to a guilty pleasure. I feel like it's mostly nostalgia from my middle school years, but I still enjoy that stuff even if my taste have changed over the years. So let's get on with the list. Oh, and I'm not gonna get into any arguments with people over what's considered new metal. This is just what I think. And this is not gonna be ranked on who's the best. This is just me naming you my favorites. But before we get to the list, let's get on with some honorable mentions. Finger 11 back in their early days. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of them on the radio from that one song Paralyzer, but before this, they were a lot more aggressive, heavy, and hardcore with their songs. A good song to listen to from their old days is Drag You Down, which I've heard from that Dragon Ball Z Lord Slug movie soundtrack. Tip is actually their first album and is really good. It's just too bad they had to go the more mainstream route and water down their sound like Paralyzer for the pussy mainstream audience like every other sellout band out there. Then we have Taproot. Taproot was a really good band. I guess you can barely set them on the new metal shelf. I picked up their first album back when it first came out, and from beginning to end, it was really good. Their albums are okay, though I don't like any of them near as much as I did at first. So let's begin the list. The first band we have here is Drowning Pool. Now, this right here is a band that I thought should have been bigger than I thought. I actually found out about this band in different medias like old WWF pay-per-views like SummerSlam and Vengeance 2001 and WrestleMania 18. Also that Dragon Ball Z movie that I watched, which I believe was that Cooler movie, and the trailer for that crappy Jason X movie. But yeah, Sinner was and still is Drowning Pool's best album. They've had some good songs like All Over Me, Tear Me Away, Reminded, and of course Bodies, which is a song that everybody knows, even non-metal fans. It's a real shame that Dave Williams died at a time when they were just starting to reach their popularity, and since then it hasn't been the same. To this day, no other vocalist has captured that same magic that Dave brought, because he had a way only he had. The new guy is fuck all, to be honest. He's not as enjoyable to the original fans, and I never listened to the new shit because, to be honest, it's the lead singer's band now. He's more in control, and that's something I dislike. I personally think if Dave Williams never died, then they would have been as popular as bands as Disturbed or Slipknot. But it's a real shame. The guy had a heart problem that he knew nothing about, and once he died, Drowning Pool died. And once again, it's a real shame. Next band we have here is El Nino. Now, as far as new metal goes, no one does it better than El Nino. No metal band fuses together radio-friendly hooks, beautiful melodies, aggression and variety, and overall balance better than these guys. And their Latin influences only make them even more unique. Even if you're not a fan of new metal, anyone who likes any kind of metal owes it to themselves to check out these guys. The next band we have is Spineshank. Now, this right here is another very underrated new metal band. Strictly Diesel is such a depressingly perfect album, but yet powerful with amazing vocals. Their second album was so-so for me, but still good enough. And their third album, Self-Destruct Pattern, is something special for me. But yeah, they're a pretty good band. The next band we have here is Edema. Now, I actually think these guys are very underrated. If any of you have ever played any Mortal Kombat game and played Deadly Alliance, you would probably remember their Immortal song, which is my favorite song from them. Some people, from what I've heard, always compared Mark Chavez's voice to Jonathan Davis. The funny thing is that these guys are actually half brothers, so I guess that explains it. Now, I've never cared for their other albums after Unstable because of the fact that Mark Chavez left. They just weren't the same after replacing him with some new vocalist. And I believe it was due to issues with Mark Chavez and the group. And it's a real shame that these bands went down to play shitty bars or clubs instead of arenas and theaters like they used to. But ever since Ozfest stopped happening and other famous bands went on hiatus, metal just never remained the same. Plus, now major labels are now being deserted and every band is now going independent. These type of metal bands just don't get signed to major record labels as how they did in the late 90s and early 2000s when nu metal was somewhat trendy. Edema should still be playing in arenas and should still be about now. But I guess that's what happens when you become a part of a trend that died off and was never able to grow from it. I did hear that Mark Chavez returned to the group back in 2017 and they were supposed to have a new album. But at this point in time, it's too little too late. He should have came back a long time ago. But it is what it is. But anyways, moving on. So next we get is Cold Chamber. Now these guys are the true creators of the new metal sound, which is based on a really simple raw riff supported by heavy, fast, powerful drums. They are also creators of the unique dark image and haircuts, which is copied by another million of nu metal bands. They're a pretty good band, and I'd recommend people check them out. The next band we have here is Disturbed. Now, I've been a fan of theirs since their first album. Most wouldn't consider them nu metal now because they've gone the more hard rock route, but from their first few albums, they were pretty much nu metal from The Sickness. I've listened to their new album and it was okay. I'd definitely recommend to some new listeners of the songs like Indestructible and 10,000 Fist in the Air if you want the authentic Disturbed experience. Those recommendations will probably be unanimously approved by the community. My personal less unanimous recommendations include All of Believe if you're in the mood for less intense music, and most of The Sickness if you want the hard, fast, raw, angry stuff. I also enjoyed Asylum, but definitely not every song. There was some weird stuff on that one also. Next band we get is Static X. Now, these guys are the true embodiment of nu metal. I've been listening to all these types of metal and rock since I was 11, and a lot of music has passed through these years. The first beginnings of the nu metal genre was starting at a time I started taking an interest in music. Static X is definitely the embodiment of that genre. So yeah, I'd definitely give these guys a shot. Next we get is Korn. Now, literally every band has ripped off Korn after 1994, and they really ushered in a whole new sound that was beyond ahead of its time. Everything after that is knockoff. Even though some bands like Deftones and Sevendust still did their own version of that sound. Linkin Park are a cheap knockoff of that sound. Yes, they had some cool songs, but they are highly unoriginal, late to the scene, and very mediocre after the first two records. Korn's first two albums were good in my opinion. Their songs were edgy, but they have this really unique, creepy horror vibe almost that I've never really been able to find anywhere else. They get a bad rep for their looks, their fan base, and their newer music. But I think a lot of people who got into heavy music started with bands like Korn and Slipknot. That being said, I only listen to the likes of Evolution, Falling Away From Me, and a few of their other hits now. And even then, it's rare. The next band we get is Mudvayne. Now, I was really huge into these guys back in middle school. The first two records were amazing for math, shock rock, and Ryan Martini is still one of my favorite bassists out there. Like, every song is uniquely perfect. If you were to define a new metal, this would be it. Mudvayne has a good grasp on the concept of new metal, though they sometimes use riffs more than once. I can agree that they are one of the best new metal bands my ears have ever had the grace to listen to. However, I kinda stopped caring after Lost and Found came out, and that's when they started to go the more boring metal sense. So yeah, moving on. The next band we get is Sevendust. Now, this right here is a great band, and it's always nice that we have a black vocalist of the genre, as you don't see that too often. Their first album is one of the best drummed albums I've ever heard. The whole album is like one big drum solo. I think all of Sevendust work is incredible, and I appreciate it in that sense 100% of the time. I could listen to the whole album, and there would not be one single song that I disliked. But I will say they have lost their step in the past few years. Sevendust rocked from 1997 to 2006, and they're still making music now, which is amazing because most don't stay relevant for that long, and that's really something to be proud of. The next band we get is a Slipknot. Now, what I like about Slipknot is the energy it projects. In no way do they try to be more deeper than that, in my opinion. While getting older, I used to think the same. They were very gimmicky. But after seeing them live, it really changed me the way I perceived them. When I saw them, they gave it all, making sure that we have a good time. I personally think Slipknot gets way too much hate from the metal community because those haters are fucking idiots who don't appreciate a band who decides to grow beyond their early days and stretch themselves as artists. Go back to their first album and have a listen to Wait and Bleed and Me Inside. Just to name a few examples, you know? And you'll actually hear Corey's singing clear vocals. And it's always been a part of their sound. Corey is one of those vocalists that can scream like the fucking mouth of hell opening and sing his heart out when he needs to. And if you don't appreciate that, then you're a fool. And the last band that I want to talk about is Deftones. Now, Deftones are probably the only new metal band that ever chose to evolve. They started out as a metal band with Tool influences, but then progressed into a band with a sound so creative that it might as well just be its own genre. No other band on earth has impressed me more than Deftones. They have more quality than all the other bands I've mentioned here combined, and a broad artistic vision that they were able to provide something outside of that fad that lasted about as long as the JNCO jeans and the wallet chains were fashionable. And I look back at bands like Limp Bizkit and Papa Roach and wonder to myself why my friends listen to that crap. Those bands didn't have the resonating power that Deftones had, which is what makes them a truly great band. And that's pretty much it for my list of my favorite new metal bands. So, if you were a fan of the new metal genre, tell me who some of your favorite bands were. But as of right now, fuckers, I'm out of here. Later.